Kaylee, what is our fifth main topic today?
Our fifth main topic comes to us from Jerek. Hey, John and crew. So I saw over the weekend that David Zaslav had lunch with Steven Spielberg, Christopher Nolan, and Peter Safran, possibly discussing Man of Steel 2. Wow, if this is true, what would a Superman film from Spielberg and Nolan be like? I'm really hoping this is true. Spielberg and Nolan are two of my absolute favorite in the industry. Did you see this story going around? What are your thoughts on this? Thanks. I mean, 9 times out of 10, what Spielberg touches turns to platinum. We saw what Nolan did. Yeah. The terminal. We saw what Nolan did with Batman. So, I mean, I think it'd be fabulous. What do you think?
Okay. All right. Just hold on a second. The concept.
Yeah.
Wrap your heads around this. Because I have no problem saying, and we talked about this a little bit when we found out Hugh Jackman was going to come back to play Wolverine again for a Deadpool 3. I said, this is one of the biggest, maybe the biggest, second biggest movie news I've ever covered in my career. If they were to announce that the filmmaking GOAT, Steven Spielberg, greatest filmmaker of all time, was going to collaborate with Christopher Nolan and Peter Safran, the new co-CEO with James Gunn at DC, to make a new Superman movie with, in my opinion, all due respect to Brandon Routh, who I love as Superman, to the all-time great Christopher Reeve, hell, even to Tom Welling. I think the greatest Superman ever in our boy Henry Cavill. That would replace Hugh Jackman coming back for Deadpool 3 as what I believe would be the second biggest piece of movie news that I have ever covered in my career. It would be orgasm-inducing. I put it at, that's a high level, folks. Like spontaneous orgasms, not easy to come by. That would be one of them.
That's what she said.
Great thing.
That would be one of them. That being said, is it actually true? Because we're seeing these headlines, right? Now let's pull up the website there, Jonathan. We're seeing these headlines that Steven Spielberg meets with meeting with a WB boss, discussing Superman and all this kind of stuff. But is it true? Well, that's a different story about whether this is true. What is true is that they did sit down and meet. This comes to us from CBR, who are quoting from a report coming out of the Hollywood Reporter, writes this. According to the Hollywood Reporter's Heat Vision newsletter, Spielberg and David Zaslav, the head honcho over there at Warner Brothers Discovery, recently met over lunch, which eventually grew to include Christopher Nolan and DC Studios co-CEO Peter Safran. Nothing official is known about what transpired at that meeting, but fans have since taken to Twitter to speculate about Spielberg's potential involvement in Man of Steel 2. The consensus amongst fans is that the Oscar-winning filmmaker could be more than a welcome addition to Henry Cavill's Superman sequel. All right, what do we know is fact and what is pure rumor? What we know as fact is that David Zaslav, head of Warner Brothers Discovery, had a lunch at a commissary at the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank with Steven Spielberg, the greatest filmmaker of all time. What was then witnessed was that after that lunch had started, Christopher Nolan joined the lunch, and James Gunn's partner and co-CEO of DC Films, Peter Safran, also joined that lunch. Okay? That much is fact. But therein the facts stop. Everything that's going on and all the headlines that we're seeing right now about, they're talking about Superman, blah, 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 none of that is fact. It is speculation. It is wild theorizing by a very hopeful audience, including me, as count me amongst the very hopeful audience. Now, you could make the argument, well, John, I mean, you don't just have lunch with Steven Spielberg and Christopher Nolan. Granted, absolutely. And Peter Safran, the new CEO of DC Films, is in that meeting. So they're not talking about Lincoln 2, The Return. They're talking about something that very easily could be a DC project. Absolutely. 100% I agree with that. But any speculation about that they were specifically sitting down to talk about Man of Steel 2 is wishful thinking. Doesn't mean it's not possible. It very well could be. And you will see a joygasm the likes of Universal as very rarely seen. Because you know me, the number one film I want to see is a Steven Spielberg directed Star Wars film. That is the biggest film wish I have ever had in my life. Second to that right now might be Steven Spielberg directing Henry Cavill in a Superman movie. That could be a pretty close second. So I'd be incredibly happy about it. So is this plausible? I would argue that it is plausible. It is absolutely plausible that they could have been sitting down to meet about Superman. But I just think that we as film fans need to pump the realistic brakes here a little bit to understand that they literally could have just been a let's get together and have lunch sort of thing. What else is really interesting here is one of the things that we know about the movie industry is that currently Christopher Nolan hates Warner Brothers. He hates them a lot. Now, under the old regime, the old ownership of Warner Brothers, Christopher Nolan penned op-eds writing about how much he thinks Warner Brothers sucks and how backhanded they were and how he hated everything that they were doing. And eventually he left the Warner Brothers stable. His next movie, I was going to say, it's not Guggenheim. The next movie, what's the name of his next movie? Oppenheimer. His next movie, Oppenheimer, is not a Warner Brothers film. It's the first Christopher Nolan film in ages. The very fact that he was there at the Warner Brothers lot, sitting down with David Zaslav, who hopefully this is symbolic of David Zaslav repairing those broken relationships with these world-class filmmakers that the previous ownership at Warner Brothers destroyed. So that's a good thing in and of itself. But can you imagine, Rob, a Superman movie with Henry Cavill back, either directed or produced by Steven Spielberg, with also directing or producing Christopher Nolan? I mean, I'll call it right now. Such a film, let's say Christopher Nolan produced a Steven Spielberg directed Superman movie with Henry Cavill. I will call it right now. It will be the greatest superhero film of all time. I'll just call it right now. Of course, anything could go wrong, but Nolan legitimately producing, Steven Spielberg directing, or flip it around. Steven Spielberg legitimately hands-on producing and Christopher Nolan directing, whatever. That film would be the greatest superhero film ever made. I mean, you never know what happens until you see it, but that would be my guess. Hey guys, we want to take a moment and thank the sponsor of this video, Athletic Greens. Now, I started taking Athletic Greens because I don't eat enough vegetables, and I was looking for a way to make up for that deficit in my diet of those vitamins and minerals that I really need in my system, and thank goodness I found Athletic Greens, and I literally take it every morning. You see, with one scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole foods, source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, all the things. And my wife got onto it, and now she absolutely loves it. You know, tons of people take some kind of multivitamin, and it's important to choose one with high-quality ingredients that your body will actually absorb, like Athletic Greens. So right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with a convenient daily nutrition, especially heading into the flu and cold season. It's just one scoop and a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Campea. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Campea to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Anyway, Rob, we see a lot of headlines, a lot of hopeful thinking. Just the fact that Steven Spielberg, Christopher Nolan, Peter Safran, and David Zaslav were sitting down at the table breaking bread together. That's incredible in and of itself. But what's your takeaway from this?
Well, it's them having lunch on the lot in the executive commissary is not as wild as you might think. Spielberg's got a movie coming out with Warner Brothers,
yep.
the Color Purple. You've got Oppenheimer. They could be mixing on the stages on the Warner lot. They just all happen to be there. And they had a lunch together just to shoot the shit or whatever. Because remember, Spielberg was going to direct Interstellar. So that's how, and then when Jonathan Nolan had written Interstellar, it was going to be a Steven Spielberg movie, and then he didn't direct it. So they're friends. They all knew each other. That's it. That's it. I, like you, we got excited when we were speculating that Steven Spielberg would direct Fantastic Four on this show.
Which we always knew was an outside shot. Yeah. But yes.
However, if I was Steven Spielberg and I just finished making The Fabelmans and I've made West Side Story, I've made some passion projects, if I wanted to return to populist, big budget, big box office filmmaking, I can't imagine a better film for Steven Spielberg if he wanted to put a little bow on his career to direct than a Superman movie. I like you, I can't think of a better director for a Superman movie than Steven Spielberg, because the combination of Americana, like that classical Superman, Richard Donner, that whole opening in Smallville and all that, and I don't think anyone is a better director or better equipped to make a Superman movie, especially now in his life, than Steven Spielberg. I don't know if Christopher Nolan necessarily would be involved with that, because he's kind of done that before. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. But I can't imagine a better person than Steven Spielberg, and it wouldn't surprise me anymore after what we've been seeing, Henry Cavill coming back. But I don't know if that would happen, but it would be, like you said, it would be one of the most exciting things that I could possibly imagine happening to any superhero movie now. And I certainly would love to see it.
Yeah.
Chris, listen, as with most wild rumors and everything, there's a kernel of truth here. This lunch happened. I do think it's very notable that, Nolan, who has been so vocally anti-Warner Brothers under the old AT&T ownership, is sitting there now with the head of the new Warner Brothers having lunch with somebody. I don't know, a lot of angles here, but what's fact, what's fiction here? I don't know. What do you think the possibilities are?
I mean, sometimes it's just a bunch of homies having lunch. That's fine. That's it. But I do think it's interesting to have Nolan in the mix here, because Zaslav, famously did his listening tour, right?
Yes.
And I'm wondering if this is even just hey, you had a successful franchise in the DC universe. Let's talk about that. How did you break that down? How did that work for you? Because we seem to be really struggling with having this big through line with our films. So what do we need to do to make this work? We've got a great Batman film. We want to make more of those. What would you do there? And maybe having him be some kind of consultant. The one I'm more interested in, like you guys, is Steven Spielberg directing Superman, potentially, right? Because if you're talking about someone who can bring wonder and scale and just an epic joy to something too,
Oh, God,
it's Spielberg, right? There's going to be so many primary colors. It's going to be beautiful. I'm so excited. I think that would be a really, really cool thing. I think it's way too early to go, yep, we all should absolutely say we're getting that Superman movie with Stevie behind the helm. No. We're going to pump those brakes a little bit, but I do think there's fire to this smoke.
I mean, it's really interesting too, because like for a lot of people who would say, well, it was just a lunch. I would say this: when you know the lives of the head of Warner Brothers Discovery, getting on his calendar is not an easy thing to do. Steven Spielberg's calendar, not an easy thing to do. Christopher Nolan's calendar, not an easy thing to do. The new co-CEO of DC Studios, Peter Safran, not all four of these guys. I mean, this wasn't, I don't believe for a second this was a happenstance. Oh, hey, you're in Burbank right now? Why don't you come over and have lunch with them? Their calendars don't work. Each one of these people has 7 personal assistants that are constantly working their schedules. This was a purposeful, deliberate sit down. Now, what was it about? Who knows? I mean, maybe it is once again a part of David Zaslav's listening tour. Maybe it's a part of him saying, you know what, Mr. Nolan, you had beef with the previous ownership here. Steven, you're the most iconic figure in the industry. Would you guys mind sitting down with me and educate me a little bit about, I mean, it could have just been that. Why was Safran there? So I'm going to say this. I'm going to set the over under that this meeting had anything to do with Superman at 20%. I'm going to say it at 20%. I'll take it. I'll take that 20%, but I'll set it the over under is 20%. Rob, you go over under 20% that they were specifically discussing a Superman project.
I don't know if they went into it specifically discussing a Superman project, but I can guarantee they did discuss a Superman project when they were at that lunch.
Chris,
so I'll go over.
Chris, over under 20%.
I go over.
You'll go over on that.
I'll go over.
Kaylee,
Over.
you're going to take the over on that too.
100%. Like, those people don't just run into each other. They're
Right.
having their assistants send up Craig's takeout. Like, that was intentional.
You know, John, there's something else. I watched Steven Spielberg was interviewed by Leslie Stahl. I watched that on CBS this morning.
Right.
Spielberg's 75 years old.
Yep.
And he spent a lot of time. He's done everything from Catch Me If You Can to Bridge of Spies to The Fablemans to Tintin. He's made all of these movies that are great. He's flexed his muscles. I'll bet you don't see Steven Spielberg talking about comic book movies. It's not real cinema.
No, you don't.
I think Steven Spielberg wants to make. I mean, he did Ready Player One, but that was part of it. He's done a whole wide variety of things. I am willing to bet at 75 years old, after doing Meet the Fabelmans, he wants to come back and do a populist, big budget, grand entertainment. That's what he wants to do.
By the way, at 75, Spielberg is not like a frail 75.
Oh, no.
He's like a Pete Carroll. For those of you non-sports initiated, he's the head coach, who you would think he's the youngest coach in the NFL. I mean, when you look at Spielberg and the way he works, he comes across like a dude in his late 50s, early 60s. I mean, that guy has all the energy in the world.
He's got the best team of people in Hollywood behind him, too. He's got collaborators he's worked with since the 70s. I think he wants to make a gigantic, big budget, thrilling Hollywood movie that puts him back on the top of the box office charts and puts his name back on everyone's lips. Not that not that Meet the Fabelmans isn't going to be lovely and talking about his youth, and he's talking about his mom and his dad. And it was really
I keep
moving.
forgetting they changed the name of it to The Fabelmans.
Yeah, it's The Fabelmans. I think he wants to come back and be like, yes, you guys are nice. Oh, this is nice. Let me show you how it's done.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong, because, was Clooney talked about how, one for them, one for me, making movies. He's done a couple that's for him. Fabelmans is clearly a passion project for his. West Side Story, clearly a passion project for his.
Tintin.
Tintin was clearly a passion project for him. But for him to go, it's been a while since I did an E.T. kind of thing where I just come out and I just make the biggest movie in the world. And this would
celebrate its 40th anniversary.
This would be that movie.
It would be that movie.
Yeah.
And you know what? Henry Cavill, it's not like he's been saying how happy he is. There's a big smile on that guy's face when he talks about Superman. And I'll tell you something else. If this is going to happen, it's already a done deal. Like we've already talked about it. It's already, and I wouldn't be surprised. Like I was thinking it's James Gunn, but now after reading this, I'm like, oh.
Because here's the other thing too. As great as I think Henry Cavill is as Superman, any talk about Henry Cavill winning an Academy Award for playing Superman is nonsense. But you get a Steven Spielberg directed Superman. Henry Cavill he's standing in front of the mirror every morning practicing his Oscar speech. Not that he would necessarily win, but he's now thinking he's legitimately got a shot at Oscar contention if Steven Spielberg's directing.
But John, I would go even further.
Further.
I would go
further than
further.
Oscars.
You say that Steven Spielberg is directing a Superman movie. How does Wall Street answer that?
Yeah.
What does the Warner Brothers stock price do?
Yeah.
When your character, your most marquee superhero everyone's talking, but we have Batman and Superman. It's Batman. No. You have the one guy whose entire oeuvre shows that there is nobody more perfect who's working today, who exists on the planet Earth to make a Superman movie than Steven Spielberg at the height of his powers, at the height of his. I buy Warner Brothers stock.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
come on.
I mean, I still think the stock's going to drop a bit for a little while. It's going to but you come out and you announce Steven Spielberg has signed up to do like a 2-film deal with Superman. I mean, it's just crazy. Anyway, we could talk about this all day. I would be very happy to talk about this all day. But anyway, guys, the question is for you. The reality is there is nothing official or legitimate that remotely suggests that what they were meeting about specifically was Superman. There's simply not. Is there some anecdotal evidence that suggests they could have been? Absolutely. Would it be wildly fun if it is? Yeah. What do you guys think is going on there? Maybe you think they were meeting about something else. Maybe you think it was about a Superman film. How would you feel if a Steven Spielberg and a Christopher Nolan were to work together on a Henry Cavill Superman film? I've already made it pretty clear how I would feel about it. How would you feel about it? Jump down to the comment section below and leave us your thoughts.